Time to look at a real fun chapter. This is called function operations. Surprisingly, the first few lessons here builds on grade 9 math. Well, that's really nice because surprisingly enough, you're going to sum and difference, which is basically combining like terms. Yeah, you know how to do that. Wow. But now we're going to take it up to the math 30-1 level. Here's what we're after. We want to see what happens to things like the domain and range and vertical line tests and doing all this other stuff. Okay, I'll get to it when we get there. All right, so let's start. First things first, let's talk about a relation. Remember, a relation is this, especially when we talk about a function, is for every x, there is one and only one value for the y. Yes. Okay, so for every x, there's only one value for y. Never heard that before. Holy smokes. We've been pushing that down your throat since grade 10. So don't forget, we can do a vertical line test. Okay, what's the vertical line test all about? Remember, if you had a graph that looked like this, boom, we can do a vertical line test, and as long as that vertical line only cuts the graph once, you're good to go. But what about this guy here called the horizontal line test? Well, remember, we're talking about the horizontal line tests when we're talking about inverse functions. Inverse functions means, well, you do a horizontal line test like this. Oh, guess what? It cuts in two places. Guess what? The inverse will not be a function. See what I mean? So if I actually draw the inverse, and let's say that this guy's here at 0 minus 5, remember what we have over here. When we draw an inverse, it's now minus 5, 0. Yeah, so your inverse is going to look an awful lot like that, right? Okay, so think about it. Is the inverse, doing a vertical line test, is the inverse a function? No, it's not. So these are things you got to kind of keep in the back of your mind when you're doing these things. Let's go on to what I want to do today. Oh, this is so cool. We're going to look at something called sum and differences of functions. Exactly what the title says is exactly what you're going to do. You're going to add or you're going to subtract functions. That's all you're going to do. You can do them algebraically. You can actually do them numerically. What does that mean? Oh, I'll tell you how to do that. And then, maybe I should put a PG 14 rating here because of its graphic nature. Yeah, graphically, we can do this graphically. It's so cool. So check this out. Two functions. You got an f of x and a g of x function. You can actually combine them to form a new function. Whoa, that is just so heavy, man. Well, no kidding. Adding functions just means take the f of x function, take the g of x function, put them together, guess what? You get a new one. But take a look at the way they write this. They can actually write this like this. F plus g of x means exactly the same thing as that. So let's look at subtraction. Same idea. Take f of x, subtract g of x. Does f of x have to go first? No. Depends on the question that they ask you. If f of x goes first, then put f of x first. G of x goes second, puts g of x second. And look, then you're going to get f minus g of x. There's your wonderful addition subtraction of this. Now, here's the cool thing you got to kind of keep in the back of your mind, right? The domain. We never talked about this when you were in grade 9 and grade 10 and combining functions. But what happens to this guy? What happens to the domain? Well, surprisingly, since you're combining the functions, you also have to somehow combine the domain. So how does the domain become combined? Well, actually, it doesn't. What happens is the domain is a combination then of both functions. Yes. The range, a little bit more difficult. So surprisingly enough, just throw this thing on your calculator, graph it, and determine the range directly from the graph. So out of your textbooks. Dun, 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 beautiful little thing from your textbook. Talks about the sum and difference of functions and the different ways that we can write them. We can write them like normal. F of x plus g of x, or f of x minus g of x, or sometimes they put the whole thing in brackets and say f plus g of x, or f minus g of x. Now, in the next couple of podcasts, this is a nice little intro, but in the next couple of podcasts, I'm going to show you how this works, and it's so incredibly cool and real easy. Stay tuned.